In a small town called Oakdale, a perfect wedding was about to take place. At the altar, the groom was hiding a secret that no one could have imagined. In the middle of the ceremony, a parrot started talking and revealed something that changed everything. What happened next was the biggest scandal the town had ever seen. Before hearing this surprising tale, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories full of twists. The sun had barely risen when Emily opened her eyes, feeling her heart race with the realization that the big day had finally arrived. Her wedding to Nathan, the man she believed to be the love of her life, would happen in a few hours. As she stretched in bed, her eyes landed on the golden perch in the corner of the room, where Lord, her inseparable bright green feathered parrot, watched her with his keen eyes. "Good morning, my love," she said cheerfully, getting up to open the curtains. Sunlight flooded the room, revealing the wedding dress hanging on the closet door, a silent reminder of the promise of eternal happiness that the day held. Lord tilted his head, his feathers shimmering under the morning light. "Good morning, Emily. Nobody can know. Tomorrow it ends," he repeated, his voice strangely clear for a parrot. Emily laughed, used to the random phrases Lord often blurted out. "Oh, Lord, you and your mysterious phrases. Today is a day of beginnings, not endings," she said affectionately, stroking the bird's feathers. As she prepared for the most important day of her life, Emily couldn't imagine that Lord's words were much more than simple, meaningless repetitions. In fact, they carried the weight of a secret that was about to come to light, threatening to destroy not only her marriage, but also the life she had carefully built. Outside, the small town of Oakdale was already buzzing with preparations for the event. The streets were decorated with ribbons and flowers, and the murmur of expectation filled the air. Emily and Nathan's wedding was the talk of the town, not only because it was the union of two beloved young people in the community, but also because it promised to be the social event of the year. At the church, Father Michael supervised the final details of the decoration, his face a mask of calm and serenity. However, if one looked closely, they might notice a slight tremor in his hands and a shadow of concern in his eyes. The young priest, admired by all for his kindness and wisdom beyond his years, carried a heavy burden in his heart, a secret that consumed him from within. Meanwhile, at Nathan's parents' house, the groom woke up with a feeling of restlessness he couldn't explain. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he stared fixedly at the suit hanging in the closet, a symbol of a commitment he wasn't sure he was ready to make. "Nathan, my son, is everything all right?" His mother's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Mrs. Johnson entered the room, her face radiant with happiness for the imminent marriage of her only son. "Yes, Mom. Just a little nervous," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's normal, my dear. But don't worry, you and Emily were made for each other. Today will be the happiest day of your lives," she said, adjusting her son's tie with maternal affection. Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of guilt grow in his chest. If his mother knew the truth, if anyone knew, he shook his head, pushing away the dark thoughts. Today was his wedding day, and he was determined to do what he believed was right, even if it meant burying his true feelings forever. Back at Emily's house, the bride was being surrounded by her friends and family, all eager to help with the final preparations. The room, once a sanctuary of calm, now buzzed with activity. Hairdressers, makeup artists, and the seamstress responsible for the last adjustments to the dress moved in a chaotic but harmonious dance. Amidst all this excitement, Lord remained on his perch, his attentive eyes following every movement. From time to time, he would let out one of his enigmatic phrases, making the women laugh and comment on how clever the parrot was. "Nobody can know. Tomorrow it ends," Lord repeated, his voice momentarily overlapping the chatter in the room. Emily, sitting in front of the mirror while having her hair done, frowned for a moment. There was something in Lord's insistence that bothered her, an uncomfortable feeling she couldn't explain, but soon the thought was swept away by the excitement of the moment, replaced by the anticipation of seeing Nathan at the altar. Meanwhile, in the church sacristy, Father Michael prepared for the ceremony, his hands trembling slightly as he donned the sacred vestments. His reflection in the mirror showed a tormented man, torn between duty and desire, between faith and a forbidden love that threatened to consume him. "Lord," he murmured, closing his eyes in a silent prayer, "give me strength to do what is right." But what was right? To perform Emily and Nathan's wedding knowing what he knew, or to reveal the truth and risk destroying not only the couple, but also his own position in the community and everything he believed? In the sound of the church bells echoed through the town, announcing that the hour was approaching. At Emily's house, the bride gave the final touches to her appearance, her heart beating fast with a mixture of emotions, happiness, anxiety, and a pinch of apprehension she couldn't explain. "It's time, dear," said her mother, entering the room, with tears in her eyes. "You look absolutely stunning." Emily smiled, trying to push away the feeling of discomfort that haunted her. This was the day she had always dreamed of, the beginning of her life with the man she loved. Nothing could go wrong, right? Before leaving the room, she cast one last look at Lord. The parrot stared back, tilting his head as if wanting to say something more. For a moment, Emily hesitated, as if expecting the bird to reveal some crucial secret. "Nobody can know," Lord repeated softly, his voice almost a whisper. Emily shook her head, laughing at her own foolishness. It was just a parrot, after all. What could he know that she didn't? With one last sigh to calm her nerves, she left the room, ready to face her destiny. The veil covered her face, but it couldn't hide the glimmer of hope in her eyes. She was about to become Mrs. Nathan Johnson, and nothing in the world could ruin this moment. Or at least that's what she thought. At the church, the guests already occupied the pews, excitedly murmuring about the beauty of the decoration and speculating about how the bride would look. Nathan stood at the altar, apparently calm, but inside he was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. His eyes met Father Michael's for a brief moment, and a current of understanding passed between them. Both knew that this day would mark not only the beginning of a marriage, but also the end of something that should never have begun. The organ began to play the wedding march, and all those present stood up, turning to the entrance of the church. The doors opened, revealing Emily in all her bridal glory. She was a vision of beauty and innocence, completely oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. As Emily slowly walked down the aisle, each step bringing her closer to a future she imagined, but which in reality was about to crumble, fate prepared its final blow. In the now empty house, Lord remained on his perch, his words echoing in the silence. "Nobody can know. Tomorrow it ends." The stage was set, the actors in position, and the drama about to begin. The wedding of the year in Oakdale was about to turn into something that no one would ever forget, for reasons that no one could have predicted. The murmur of the guests ceased when Emily reached the altar, her face radiant behind the delicate veil. Nathan smiled, but the gesture didn't reach his eyes, which betrayed a mixture of guilt and apprehension. Father Michael cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly as he began the ceremony. "Dear brothers and sisters, we are gathered here to celebrate the union of Emily and Nathan." As the priest spoke, Nathan's mind wandered, recalling the events that had led him here. 6 months ago, during the wedding preparations, he had approached the young priest, seeking spiritual guidance to calm his doubts. What began as innocent conversations soon turned into something deeper, more dangerous. Nathan cast a furtive glance at Father Michael, remembering their secret meetings, the whispered words, the promises made in the shadows of the sacristy. The weight of this secret now suffocated him, in front of the entire community and the woman who trusted him. Emily, oblivious to her groom's inner turmoil, smiled radiantly. Her thoughts flew to the future she imagined, a house full of love, children running in the backyard, cozy nights beside the man she loved. Little did she know that this dream was about to shatter. In the front row, Mrs. Johnson, Nathan's mother, watched the couple with tear-filled eyes of happiness. Beside her, Mr. Thompson, Emily's father, maintained a solemn expression, proud of his only daughter. The congregation watched in respectful silence, unaware of the drama unfolding before their eyes. Father Michael continued the ceremony, his voice gaining strength as he progressed, as if trying to convince himself of the legitimacy of this marriage. Marriage is a sacred union, a commitment before God and the community. Meanwhile, at Emily's house, Lord remained on his golden perch, his green feathers shining under the light coming through the window. The parrot tilted his head from side to side, as if he could sense the tension building up in the church. Nobody can know. Tomorrow, it ends, he repeated softly, his words echoing through the empty house. Back at the church, the moment for the vows was approaching. Nathan felt sweat running down his back, his heart beating so hard he feared everyone could hear it. Emily gently squeezed his hand, interpreting his nervousness as emotion for the big moment. "Nathan," Father Michael began, his voice betraying a slight tremor, "do you take Emily as your lawful wife, promising to love and respect her, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, all the days of your life?" Time seemed to freeze. Nathan felt the weight of all eyes on him. He saw Emily's hopeful smile, his mother's expectant expression, Father Michael's penetrating gaze. His mind screamed to tell the truth, to end this farce before it was too late, but his lips moved almost of their own accord. "I do," he said, his voice no more than a whisper. The relief on Emily's face was palpable, contrasting dramatically with Nathan's inner turmoil. Father Michael proceeded, asking Emily the same question, to which she responded with an "I do" full of conviction and love. As the ceremony continued, Nathan found himself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Love for Emily, yes, but not the kind of love he should feel for a wife. Guilt for deceiving her, for betraying her trust, and above all, an ardent and forbidden desire for the man who was conducting the ceremony. Father Michael, in turn, struggled to maintain his composure. Every word he uttered was a stab in his own heart. He knew he was betraying not only his vocation, but also the trust of the entire community. Still, he couldn't avoid the furtive glances at Nathan, remembering the intimate moments they had shared. The exchange of rings was a particularly painful moment. When Nathan slid the ring onto Emily's finger, he felt as if he was sealing not just a commitment, but also the end of any possibility of true happiness. The cold metal against his skin was a constant reminder of the choice he had made. Emily, on the other hand, was radiant. Every moment of the ceremony was the realization of a childhood dream. The white dress, the flowers, the man she loved swearing eternal love before God and the entire community. She didn't notice the shadows in Nathan's eyes, nor the tension in Father Michael's voice. For her, everything was perfect. As the ceremony neared its end, Father Michael made a final effort to maintain his composure. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man separate." The words sounded like a sentence to Nathan and the priest, both aware of the cruel irony of that declaration. The newlyweds' kiss, which should have been a moment of pure joy, was tainted by guilt and regret. As the couple turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, applause and cheers echoed through the church. Confetti flew through the air, and bright smiles illuminated the guests' faces. In the midst of this celebration, only 3 people knew the truth: the groom, the priest, and a green parrot miles away. The reception that followed was a whirlwind of congratulations, music, and laughter. Emily circulated among the guests, her face radiant with happiness, completely oblivious to her now husband's inner torment. Nathan did his best to keep up appearances, smiling and thanking the well-wishers, while inside he felt like he was falling apart. Father Michael, having fulfilled his role in the ceremony, found refuge in a quiet corner of the party. He observed the newlywed couple from afar, his heart heavy with the secret he shared with Nathan. Every smile, every touch between the newlyweds was a stab in his chest. As the night progressed, the tension grew. Nathan found himself torn between his duty as a newlywed and the burning desire to talk to Father Michael, to find some comfort or resolution for the emotional turmoil that consumed him. In a moment of relative calm, when Emily was busy with The bridesmaids, Nathan managed to discreetly approach the priest. "Michael," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the music, "we need to talk." The priest looked at him, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and resignation. "There's nothing more to be said, Nathan. You made your choice. But I can't live like this," Nathan pleaded, his voice breaking. What we had is over," Father Michael interrupted firmly, although his tone betrayed the internal conflict. "You have a wife now, a life ahead of you. It's better we forget the past." Before Nathan could respond, Emily appeared, radiant and unsuspecting. "Oh, you're here. Father, thank you again for the beautiful ceremony. It was all perfect." Father Michael forced a smile. "It was my pleasure, Emily. I wish all the happiness in the world for both of you." Nathan felt the weight of those words, knowing how much they cost the man who uttered them. Emily, interpreting her husband's silence as emotion, linked her arm with his. "Shall we go, love? Everyone is waiting for the toast." With one last meaningful look at Father Michael, Nathan allowed himself to be led by Emily back to the center of attention. The party continued into the night, a celebration of love and union that hid at its core a secret capable of destroying not just a marriage, but an entire community. Meanwhile, in Emily's silent house, Lord remained on his perch, his black eyes shining in the darkness. "Nobody can know. Tomorrow it ends," he repeated once more, as if sensing the storm that was approaching. The wedding night, which should have been the culmination of the celebration of love, became an exercise in pretense for Nathan. Each caress, each kiss was accompanied by a pang of guilt. Emily, in her innocent happiness, didn't notice her husband's torment, attributing his hesitation to the natural nervousness of a newlywed. When he finally managed to fall asleep, hours later, Nathan was haunted by nightmares, in which he saw himself divided between Emily and Father Michael, with Lord the Parrot incessantly repeating, "Nobody can know. Tomorrow it ends." The following day would bring new challenges and revelations as the young couple began their life together, carrying the weight of a secret that threatened to destroy not only their marriage, but the entire web of relationships that formed the fabric of the small community of Oakdale. The rising sun painted the sky of Oakdale with soft shades of pink and orange when Emily opened her eyes, a radiant smile illuminating her face. She turned in bed, expecting to find Nathan beside her, but the space was empty and cold. Frowning, she sat up, noticing the silence that hung over the house. "Nathan," she called, her voice echoing through the new house they had bought to start their married life. There was no response. Emily got up, putting on a robe over her silk nightgown. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor as she walked through the rooms, looking for her husband. In the kitchen, she found a note on the table. "Left early to take care of some business. I'll be back for lunch. With love, Nathan." Emily sighed, a slight disappointment clouding her morning happiness. She had hoped to spend her first day as a married woman in her husband's arms, planning the future and savoring the novelty of their union. But Nathan had always been dedicated to work, and she admired that about him. With a shrug, she decided to take advantage of the morning to tidy up the house and prepare a special meal for when he returned. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Nathan walked hurriedly towards the church. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were still deserted, for which he was grateful. The last thing he wanted was to encounter an acquaintance who might question why the newlywed was out of the house so early. Upon reaching the church, he found Father Michael in the sacristy, preparing for the morning mass. The young priest paled upon. Seeing Nathan, his hand trembling slightly as he adjusted his vestments. "What are you doing here?" whispered Michael, glancing nervously at the door. "Someone might see us." Nathan closed the door behind him, his face a mask of anguish. "I can't take it anymore, Michael. This lie, it's killing me inside." The priest closed his eyes for a moment, as if seeking inner strength. "Nathan, we've talked about this. What happened between us? That it was a mistake that can't be repeated." "A mistake," Nathan repeated, his voice laden with emotion. "It was the most genuine moment of my life. How can I live a lie beside Emily when my heart belongs to you?" "Michael," felt his resolve waver in the face of Nathan's intensity. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to remember the moments they had shared, the long conversations, the furtive touches, the stolen kiss in the darkness of the sacristy. But then, the reality of his position, of his vows, crashed down on him like a crushing weight. "We can't do this, Nathan," he said firmly, though his heart screamed otherwise. "You have a wife now, I have my vows. What happened between us has to stay in the past." Nathan stepped forward, his hands trembling with pent-up emotion. "And if I can't forget you, if every moment with Emily is a reminder of what I can't have with you." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them abruptly move apart. The sacristy door opened, revealing Mrs. Thompson, the church caretaker. "Father Michael, are you—" "Oh," she stopped, surprised to see Nathan. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were busy." Michael forced a smile. "No problem, Mrs. Thompson. Nathan just stopped by to pick up the Bible he forgot yesterday." Nathan nodded mechanically, grabbing a random Bible from the shelf. "Yes, exactly. I was just leaving." With one last meaningful look at Michael, Nathan hurriedly left the sacristy, leaving behind a tormented priest and a confused caretaker. Meanwhile, back at Nathan and Emily's house, the young bride woke up, instinctively reaching out to Nathan's side of the bed, only to find it empty and cold. Frowning, she got up and went to the kitchen, where she found Nathan sitting at the table, an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. "Good morning, love," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "You're up early today." Nathan forced a smile, his stomach churning with guilt. "Good morning. Em, I needed to think a bit." Emily sat across from him, her expression serious. "Nathan, what's going on? You've been so distant lately. Is there something you're not telling me?" The moment Nathan had both dreaded and longed for had finally arrived. He took a deep breath, gathering courage for the words that would change everything. He began, his voice trembling. "I need to tell you something that will change everything between us." Emily's face paled, her eyes widening with fear and anticipation. "What is it, Nate? You're scaring me." Nathan opened his mouth to continue, but was interrupted by the shrill sound of the telephone. Emily, startled by the sudden noise, got up to answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice still trembling. Her eyes widened at what she heard on the other end of the line. "What, but how—" Yes, I understand. We'll be there as soon as possible." She hung up the phone, turning to Nathan with a shocked expression. "It was from the church. Father Michael, he fainted during Mass. They took him to the hospital." Nathan felt his blood run cold. "What? Is he all right?" "They don't know yet," Emily replied, already moving to get dressed. "Come on, we need to go to the hospital." Nathan's secret was momentarily forgotten in the rush that followed. In minutes they were in the car, driving to the local hospital. Nathan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, his mind a whirlwind of worry and guilt. At the hospital, they found the waiting room packed with concerned parishioners. Mrs. Thompson was there, her face a mask of worry and something else and suspicion. What happened exactly? What happened? Emily asked one of the deacons present. "It was during the homily," he explained. "Father Michael seemed nervous, distracted. Suddenly he just collapsed. The doctors are with him now." Nathan felt nauseous. Had the pressure, the stress of their shared secret been too much for Michael? He couldn't help but feel responsible. The hours dragged on, tense and silent. Emily alternated between comforting worried parishioners and casting questioning glances at Nathan, clearly not forgetting the interrupted conversation from earlier. Finally, a doctor appeared, his face serious but not alarmed. "Father Michael is stable," he announced. "It appears to have been a case of extreme exhaustion, possibly exacerbated by emotional stress. He needs rest and possibly some psychological follow-up." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Nathan felt his legs weaken, and he had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "Can we see him?" someone asked. The doctor shook his head. "Not now. He needs to rest. Maybe tomorrow, if he's feeling better." Slowly, people began to disperse, murmuring prayers and expressions of concern. Nathan remained motionless, torn between the relief of knowing Michael was okay and the terror of what might happen next. Emily approached him, gently touching his arm. "Let's go home, Nate. You look exhausted." He nodded mechanically, allowing himself to be guided out of the hospital. On the way back, the silence in the car was heavy, laden with unasked questions and untold truths. Upon arriving home, Emily finally broke the silence. "Nathan, what were you going to tell me this morning before the phone call?" Nathan felt his heart race. It was now. There was no more delaying. He looked at Emily, seeing the love and concern in her eyes, and felt himself shatter inside. He began, his voice failing. "I don't know how to say this." Emily took his hands, squeezing them gently. "Whatever it is, Nate, we can face it together. We're a team, remember?" Nathan closed his eyes, gathering all his courage. When he opened them again, he saw Polly observing them from her perch, like a silent witness. "I have feelings for someone else," he finally said, the words coming out like a torrent. "Someone I shouldn't. Someone that I can't have." Emily let go of his hands as if they had burned her. "What? Who? For how long?" Nathan felt the tears start to fall. "Since before the wedding, I thought I could get over it, that marrying you would make everything okay, but it didn't. I'm so sorry, Em, I'm so sorry." Emily backed away, her face a mask of pain and betrayal. "Who is she, Nathan? Do I know her?" Nathan hesitated, knowing that the next revelation could destroy everything. It's not a she, Em." Understanding slowly spread across Emily's face, her eyes widening with shock. "No, it can't be. Nathan, please tell me it's not who I'm thinking." At that moment, as if to confirm Emily's suspicions, Polly spoke. "Nobody can know like Father Michael." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked from the Parrot to Nathan, her face a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Father Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You and Father Michael?" Nathan nodded miserably, unable to find words to explain, to apologize, to fix what he had broken. Emily staggered backward, as if she had been punched. "Get out," she said, her voice shaking. "Get out of my house now." Please, let me explain." Nathan pleaded, taking a step towards her. "Get out," Emily shouted, tears running down her face. "I don't want to hear anything else. Just go away." With a heavy heart, Nathan picked up his wallet and car keys. He cast one last look at Emily, who was now sobbing on the couch, and at Polly, who was watching him with her inscrutable eyes. "Tomorrow ends," repeated the Parrot, its words sounding like a final sentence. Nathan walked out into the night, leaving behind the ruins of what was once his happy home. As he drove aimlessly through the streets of Oakville, he wondered how things had come to this point, and what the future held for him, for Emily, and for Michael. The day that had begun with the promise of resolution ended in chaos and heartbreak. The revelations made could not be unsaid, and the lives of all involved had been irrevocably altered. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Father Michael slept a restless sleep, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded. And in a small house in the center of Oakville, Mrs. Thompson was making a call to the diocese bishop, her voice trembling with the gravity of the accusations she was about to make. The storm that had been forming for so long had finally arrived, and no one in Oakville would emerge unscathed from its fury. The sun rose over Oakville, its golden rays illuminating a town that had changed drastically overnight. The air was heavy with tension, as if nature itself sensed that something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of the community. In the house she had shared with Nathan until yesterday, Emily awoke with swollen eyes and a dry throat. For a brief moment, she hoped that everything had been just a terrible nightmare, but the empty bed beside her and the oppressive silence of the house confirmed the painful reality. She got up mechanically, dragging herself to the kitchen. Polly watched her from her perch, tilting her head as if trying to understand her owner's suffering. "Good morning, Emily," said the Parrot, her voice strangely soft. Emily looked at the bird, feeling a mixture of anger and gratitude. It had Been Polly, after all, who had revealed the truth that Nathan was reluctant to confess. "Thank you, Polly," she murmured, reaching out to stroke the green feathers. "At least you were honest with me." On the other side of town, Nathan was waking up in the back seat of his car, parked in a dark alley. His body ached, and his mind was clouded by lack of sleep and the weight of the decisions he needed to make. He started the car, deciding to go to the hospital. He needed to see Michael, talk to him, figure out what they would do now that everything had been revealed. At the hospital, Father Michael was slowly waking up, his mind still confused by the events of the previous day. The first thing he saw was Mrs. Thompson's concerned face sitting next to his bed. "Father," she said, her voice a mixture of concern and disapproval. "How are you feeling?" Michael tried to sit up, feeling a wave of dizziness. "Better, I think. What happened?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated, her eyes avoiding his. "You fainted during Mass. The doctors said it was stress." Michael nodded slowly, remembering the feeling of panic that had overwhelmed him at the altar. Then, like lightning, the memory of his last conversation with Nathan hit him. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice urgent, "I need to speak with Nathan. Can you call him for me?" The caretaker's expression hardened. "I don't think that's a good idea, Father. In fact, there's something I need to tell you." At that moment, the door to the room opened, revealing a tall, imposing man wearing the characteristic clothes of a bishop. Behind him, two other priests followed with serious expressions. "Father Michael," said the bishop, his grave voice echoing in the small room, "we have much to discuss." Michael felt his blood run cold. Mrs. Thompson's look, the bishop's presence. He knew at that instant that his secret had been discovered. Meanwhile, at the hospital reception, Nathan arrived, his heart racing at the prospect of seeing Michael. He approached the counter, ready to ask about the priest's room, when a firm hand touched his shoulder. Turning around, he found himself face to face with Emily's father, Mr. Anderson. The older man stared at him with a mixture of disappointment and barely contained anger. "I think we'd better talk outside, Nathan," said Mr. Anderson, his voice making it clear that it wasn't a request. With a heavy heart, Nathan followed his father-in-law out of the hospital. He knew this conversation would be difficult, but it was something he could no longer avoid. Back at Emily's house, the doorbell rang, pulling her out of her dark thoughts. Opening the door, she was surprised to see her best friend, Sophia, standing there with a concerned expression. "Em," said Sophia, pulling her into a tight hug. "I came as soon as I heard. How are you?" Emily felt the tears return in full force. "I don't know, Soph. I don't know anything anymore." The two friends entered, sitting on the couch. Sophia held Emily's hands, her eyes full of compassion. "Do. You want to tell me what happened?" she asked gently. Emily hesitated. How to explain something she herself barely understood. How to put into words the betrayal, the pain, the confusion she felt. "Nathan," she began, her voice trembling. "Nathan is in love with someone else." Sophia squeezed her hands. "Oh, Em, I'm so sorry. Who is she?" Emily closed her eyes, gathering courage for the revelation she knew would shock her friend as much as it had shocked her. "It's not a she, Soph," she said finally. "It's him, Father Michael." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia looked at Emily, mouth agape, unable to process what she had just heard. "What?" she finally managed to say. "But how? When?" Before Emily could answer, Polly spoke from her perch. "Nobody can know. Tomorrow ends." Sophia looked at the parrot, then back at Emily. "What does that mean?" Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Apparently, it means that my husband and our parish priest were having an affair right under my nose, and I was the last to... No." In the hospital parking lot, the conversation between Nathan and Mr. Anderson was far from friendly. "How could you do this to my daughter?" Mr. Anderson demanded, his voice laden with anger. "Marry her knowing you loved someone else? And a man no less, a priest." Nathan lowered his head, feeling the weight of his actions. "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson, I really thought I could make it work with Emily. I do love her, really, it's just that..." "Just not enough," Mr. Anderson completed, his voice cutting. "You destroyed her life, Nathan, And for what? For an impossible fantasy with a priest. His father-in-law's words hit Nathan like physical blows. He knew he deserved every one of them, but that didn't make the truth any less painful. "What's going to happen now?" Nathan asked, his voice low. Mr. Anderson stared at him coldly. Now you're going to stay away from my daughter. You're going to give her a divorce and disappear from her life. And as for Father Michael, well, the church has its own ways of dealing with scandals like this." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "The bishop is here," Mr. Anderson replied. "Apparently someone made a complaint. Father Michael will probably be transferred to some remote monastery if he's lucky. If not..." The unspoken words hung in the air between them. Nathan felt panic growing in his chest. He needed to see Michael, needed to warn him, protect him somehow. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, Michael was facing his own judgment. The bishop stared at him with a mixture of disappointment and anger, while Mrs. Thompson remained in a corner, her expression a mask of determination. "Father Michael," the bishop began, his voice grave, "we have been informed of very serious accusations against you. Accusations of improper conduct with a married member of your parish." Michael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of years of secrecy and guilt crashing down on him. When he opened them again, there was a resolution in his gaze. "It's true," he said simply. The room fell silent for a moment, the shock palpable in the air. The bishop was the first to recover. "Do you understand the gravity of what you're confessing?" he asked. "The consequences of your actions?" Michael nodded slowly. "I understand, Your Excellency, and I am prepared to face whatever comes." The bishop exchanged glances with the other priests present, then turned back to Michael. "You will be immediately removed from your duties in the parish. There will be a full investigation, and then the Vatican will decide your fate." Michael felt a strange sense of relief spread through his body. After so long living in the shadow of fear and guilt, the truth, as painful as it was, brought with it a sense of liberation. "I accept my fate," he said, his voice firm, "but I ask only one thing. Do not punish Nathan for my mistakes. The fault is mine and mine alone." The bishop stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your confession and your repentance will be taken into consideration, but I can't promise anything beyond that." While Father Michael was confronted with the consequences of his actions, at Emily's house a decision was being made. "I can't stay here, Lucy," Emily said, her voice laden with determination. "Every corner of this house reminds me of him, of what we lost, of the lies." Lucy squeezed her friend's hand. "Where will you go?" Emily looked at Lord, who was silently observing them from his perch. "I don't know yet. Maybe to my parents. House for now. I just know I need a fresh start." "And what about Nathan?" Lucy asked hesitantly. Emily felt a wave of conflicting emotions hit her. Anger, sadness, confusion, and, surprisingly, a hint of compassion. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to hate him for what he did. But another part understands how difficult it must have been for him. Living a lie, repressing who he really is." Lucy hugged her friend tightly. "You're amazing, you know that. After everything, you can still have empathy." Emily smiled sadly. "I don't know if it's empathy or madness. I just know I need to get away from all this for a while, figure out who I am without Nathan, without all this drama." The two friends began to make plans, discussing where Emily could go, how to reorganize her life. Meanwhile, Lord watched them, occasionally letting out his characteristic phrase, "Nobody can know. Tomorrow ends." And indeed, as the sun set over Oakville on that tumultuous day, it was clear that a chapter had ended. The tomorrow that Lord had been announcing had finally arrived, bringing with it the end of illusions, the collapse of carefully constructed facades, and the beginning of an uncertain journey for all involved. The small town, which had always seemed so unchanging in its traditions and values, now found itself forced to face uncomfortable truths and difficult questions. And at the center of it all were Emily, Nathan, and Father Michael, three lost souls trying to find their way in a world that suddenly seemed too big and too scary to navigate alone. The days that followed in Oakville were marked by a heavy silence and furtive glances. News of the scandal involving Father Michael and Nathan spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers in the markets, hushed conversations on street corners, and rampant speculation on local social media. Emily, determined to escape the whirlwind, of gossip and pity, had temporarily moved to her parents' house on the outskirts of town. Lord, her faithful winged companion, accompanied her, his presence an unexpected source of comfort. On a particularly sunny morning, Emily found herself in the backyard, lost in thought when Lord landed on her shoulder. "Nobody can know," murmured the parrot, his voice almost comforting in its familiarity. Emily smiled sadly, stroking the bird's green feathers. "There are no more secrets to hide, Lord. Everyone already knows." As if understanding the weight of those words, Lord tilted his head and said something new. "Start over." Emily looked at the bird in surprise. "Start over? Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for a new beginning." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Nathan was facing his own battles. After days of wandering aimlessly, he finally found the courage to return to the apartment he shared with Emily. The place was exactly as they had left it, a museum of a life that now seemed to have belonged to someone else. With a heavy heart, Nathan began to pack his belongings. Each object brought with it a memory, a broken promise, a future that would never be realized. When he got to the wedding photos, he couldn't contain the tears that had been threatening to fall for days. "Forgive me, Em," he whispered to the smiling image of his wife. "I never meant to hurt you." At that moment, the doorbell rang, pulling him from his melancholic thoughts. Opening the door, Nathan was surprised to see Lucy, Emily's best friend, standing there with a determined expression. "Lucy, what are you doing here?" he asked, confused. Lucy stared at him for a long moment before answering. "I came to pick up some things for Emily, and I came to see how you're doing." Nathan blinked, surprised by the unexpected concern. "Me? I thought you hated me." Lucy sighed, entering the apartment. "I wanted to hate you, Nathan. Believe me, it would be much easier, but Emily made me see things from a different perspective." "How so?" Nathan asked, sitting heavily on the couch. Lucy joined him, her words carefully chosen. She said that despite the pain she's feeling, she understands how difficult it must have been for you. Living a lie, denying who you really are. Nathan felt the tears return in full force. "I never wanted to hurt her, Lucy. I really do love her. It's just not in the way she deserves," Lucy completed softly. Nathan nodded, unable to speak. Lucy, surprising them both, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Look, what you did was wrong. Lying, getting married, knowing you love someone else, affair that hurt Emily a lot. But denying who you are, living a life that isn't yours, that's not right either." Nathan looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude and sorrow. "I don't know what to do, Lucy. I've made such a mess of everything." Lucy sighed, her expression softening. "I can't tell you what to do, Nathan. But I think you need to be honest with yourself first. And then maybe you can start making things right." As they sat there, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air, Lord's words echoed in Nathan's mind. "Nobody can know. Tomorrow ends." But tomorrow had come, and with it, the truth had been revealed. Now it was time to face the consequences and find a way forward. Across town at St. Mary's Hospital, Father Michael was preparing to leave. The bishop's verdict had been swift and uncompromising. He was to be sent to a remote monastery for reflection and penance. As he packed the few belongings he was allowed to take, he couldn't help but wonder about Nathan. Had he been spared? The worst of the fallout? Was there any chance for them in some distant future? A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Here it was Sister Margaret, the hospital's head nurse, her kind face etched with concern. "Father Michael," she said softly, "your ride is here." He nodded, picking up his small bag. "Thank you, sister, for everything." As he walked down the hospital corridor for the last time, Father Michael felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The secret that had weighed on him for so long was finally out in the open, but the price of that freedom was steep. His vocation, his community, and possibly the man he loved. Outside, a simple black car waited. The driver, a somber-looking priest he didn't recognize, opened the door without a word. As Father Michael settled into the back seat, he cast one last glance at the town he had called home. Oakville, with its quaint streets and familiar faces, suddenly seemed like a distant memory. The car pulled away, carrying Father Michael towards an uncertain future. As the town receded in the rear-view mirror, he whispered a quiet prayer, not for himself but for Nathan and Emily, hoping they would find peace and healing in the wake of the storm he had helped create. Back in Oakville, life was slowly, painfully, adjusting to the new reality. The church, once the heart of the community, stood quiet and subdued. A temporary priest had been assigned, but many parishioners found it hard to trust again. The scandal had shaken their faith, not just in the church, but in the very fabric of their tightly knit community. At the Wilson house, Emily's parents were doing their best to support their daughter through this difficult time. Emily's mother, Sarah, knocked gently on her bedroom door. Honey, can I come in?" A soft yes came from inside. Sarah entered to find Emily sitting on the bed, absently stroking Lord's feathers. The parrot, usually chatty, was uncharacteristically quiet, as if sensing the gravity of the situation. "How are you feeling today?" Sarah asked, sitting beside her daughter. Emily shrugged, her eyes distant. "I don't know, Mom. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm just numb. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed." Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. You couldn't have known. But shouldn't I have?" Emily's voice cracked. "He was my husband. We were supposed to know everything about each other." Sarah sighed, choosing her words carefully. Love can sometimes blind us to things we might otherwise see. And Nathan, well, he was struggling with something very deep and personal. It doesn't excuse his actions, but it might help explain them. Emily nodded slowly, leaning into her mother's embrace. I feel so lost, Mom. Like everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie." "I know, honey," Sarah soothed, stroking Emily's hair. "But you're strong. You'll find your way through this, and you have all of us to support you." As if on cue, Lord chirped softly. "Start over." Emily couldn't help but smile. "You know, Mom, I think Lord might be the wisest one in this family." Sarah chuckled, grateful for the moment of levity. "Well, he certainly has a way with words. Now how about some breakfast? Your father's making his famous pancakes." As Emily followed her mother downstairs, she felt a small spark of hope. It was faint, barely there, but it was something to hold on to. Maybe, just maybe, she could start over. Meanwhile, Nathan had moved into a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of town. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. He had drafted and deleted countless messages to Emily, each one feeling inadequate, insufficient to express the depth of his remorse and the complexity of his feelings. Finally, with a deep breath, he typed out a simple message. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you're willing, I'd like to talk. To explain, to apologize, I don't know. Whatever you need, I'll understand if you say no. I'm so sorry for everything. Nathan." His finger hovered over the send button for what felt like an eternity. Finally, closing his eyes, he pressed it. The soft whoosh of the sent message seemed deafening in the quiet room. Now all he could do was wait and hope that somewhere in her heart, Emily could find the strength to hear him out. As the day wore on, the residents of Oakville continued to grapple with the fallout of the scandal. At the local diner, hushed conversations revolved around the shocking revelations. Some expressed sympathy for Emily, others condemnation for Nathan and Father Michael. A few brave souls even dared to suggest that perhaps this was an opportunity for the town to become more open-minded, more accepting of differences. At the newspaper office, Editor-in-Chief Frank Thompson was having a heated discussion with his team. The story was too big to ignore, but how to report on it sensitively without causing further harm. "We have a responsibility to our readers," Frank argued, to report the facts. But we also have a responsibility to our community. This isn't some big city where people can hide in anonymity. These are our neighbors, our friends. His senior reporter, Jessica, nodded in agreement. What if we focus on the broader issues? Use this as an opportunity to discuss the challenges faced by LGBTQ+ individuals in small towns, the pressure to conform, the lack of support systems. Frank considered this, stroking his chin thoughtfully. That could work. We report on the basic facts of what happened, but then pivot to the larger societal issues at play. It might help people understand, maybe even foster some compassion. As the newspaper team worked on their story, across town, the first seeds of change were beginning to sprout. At the high school, a group of students had approached their guidance counselor about starting a gay-straight alliance club. The counselor, initially hesitant, found herself moved by the students' passion and determination. "You know what?" she said, after listening to their proposal. "I think this is exactly what our school needs right now. Let's do it." The students left her office buzzing with excitement, already planning their first meeting. Back at the Wilson house, Emily was curled up on the porch swing, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. Lord perched nearby, occasionally ruffling his feathers or muttering softly. The ping of her phone startled her from her reverie. When she saw Nathan's name on the screen, her heart began to race. With trembling fingers, she opened the message. As she read his words, a whirlwind of emotions swept through her. Anger, hurt, confusion, and underneath it all, a tiny flicker of something that might have been understanding. "Start over," Lord chirped, as if sensing her inner turmoil. Emily looked at the parrot, then back at the phone. Could she do it? Could she face Nathan, hear him out without falling apart? She didn't know if she was ready, but she also knew that without closure, without answers, she'd never be able to truly move forward. Taking a deep breath, she began to type. "Nathan, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but you're right, we need to talk. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I'll let you know when." Emily. As she hit send, Emily felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step towards understanding, towards healing, towards whatever came next. In his motel room, Nathan's phone buzzed. When he saw Emily's response, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It wasn't much, but it was something. A chance, however small, to make things right. As the sun began to set on another day in Oakville, the town found itself at a crossroads. Old certainties had been shaken, comfortable assumptions challenged. But in the midst of the turmoil, there were glimmers of hope, small acts of kindness, tentative steps towards understanding, the first stirrings of change. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more struggles. But as Lord had said, tomorrow was ending, and with each ending comes the possibility of a new beginning. In the quiet of the evening, as the lights began to twinkle on in homes across Oakville, there was a sense that something had shifted. The town would never be quite the same again, but perhaps, just perhaps, it could become something better, more compassionate, more accepting, more truly a community. And so, as night fell, Oakville settled into an uneasy but hopeful sleep, waiting to see what the dawn of a new day would bring. End of story.